There will now be an opportunity for silent prayer or meditation. Please be seated. The first item on the order paper is the motion in the name of the Chief Whip of the Majority Party.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I move that the House, notwithstanding Rule 29, which provides for the sequence of the proceedings, limits the business for today to the tabling of the medium-term budget policy statement and the introduction of the Adjustments Appropriation Bill and related matters. I thank you.
I put the motion. Are there any objections? No objections. Agreed to. The Secretary will read the first to the fourth orders together.
Medium-term budget policy statement, introduction, adjustments appropriation bill, introduction, rates and monetary amounts and amendment of revenue laws bill, introduction, taxation laws amendment bill.
I will now recognize the Honorable, the Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Mr. President, Deputy President, Cabinet colleagues, and Deputy Ministers, Governor and Governor-Designator of the Reserve Bank, MECs of Finance, Honorable Members, fellow South Africans. It is my privilege to present the 2014 Medium-Term Budget Policy Statement and the Adjustments Appropriation Bill, the Division of Revenue Amendment Bill, all for 2014-15, and this year's tax bills. Mr. President, we are calling upon Parliament to consider our budget proposals at a difficult time. In many countries, growth has slowed and the economic outlook is uncertain. Across the world, tough questions are being asked about how to generate growth and how to reduce inequality. Governments everywhere face difficult choices because the gap between what is required and what can be afforded is very wide. And so we have to be steadfast in our resolve to do more together with less. Honorable Speaker, we have tabled the 2014, when we tabled the 2014 budget in February, we expected the economy to grow by 2.7% this year. The revised estimate is now 1.4%. The Treasury projects that growth will reach 3% only in 2017. This downward revision is partly because of a weak global environment, including the slowdown in our trading partners, Europe, China, and other emerging economies. But it also reflects challenges to our own development, ranging from energy constraints, labor market disruptions, skills shortages, administrative shortcomings, and difficulties in our industrial transformation. We have achieved much over the past 20 years, Madam Speaker. We have expanded education and healthcare. We have broadened economic participation and extended income support to the most vulnerable. But we are not making enough progress in raising incomes or reducing poverty. Far too many people are unemployed, which deepens inequality and heightens vulnerability. We import considerably more than we export. As a result of slow growth, tax revenue is below our budget projections. Government's debt continues also to rise as a percentage of gross domestic product. Increased debt is not in itself a bad thing, Madam Speaker, if it finances investment in future productive capacity. But we are not investing enough, and our expenditure on public services achieves less than it should. And so, Honorable Speaker, the budget framework we table today is focused on restoring balance to the nation's finances, bolstering investment, and achieving better value for money in public expenditure. We want to improve our export performance and shift away from consumption-led, debt-reliant expansion. These changes are fundamental to our economic transformation because they are the foundations of our social progress and human development goals, on which our human development goals will be achieved. Our National Development Plan is about both growth and redistribution, expanding output and incomes and building a more inclusive and more equal society. As emphasized by President Zuma in opening of the 5th Parliament, we need economic growth of around 5% a year to decisively reduce unemployment and poverty and to transform our social and economic order. There are many aspects to this transformation challenge, and I want to take you through a few of them. The first is how we utilize land and our mineral resources. The second is how we organize transport, energy, and communication networks. Also, how we manage cities and local government. How we improve education and health services. How we reform our social security and welfare services. And how we broaden ownership and enterprise development. And how we engage with Africa and the rest of the world. We cannot achieve this vision if we remain on our present economic path. We have to navigate a definite change of course, taking all South Africans with us. Honorable Speaker, the budget framework we are proposing for the period ahead signals this change. But economic development is much more than a schedule of taxes and spending plans. The success of our budget is defined by our contribution to building a more equal and prosperous society as envisaged in the National Development Plan. Government's actions over the next 5 years to achieve this vision are set out in the medium-term strategic framework. It highlights the need for a compact between a capable developmental state, a thriving business sector, and strong civil society. It identifies employment, education, and enhancing the capacity of the state as central policy objectives. Our medium-term strategic framework includes programs aimed at improving our competitiveness, particularly in new areas such as oil and gas development, renewable energy, and green technology. It recognizes the need to support job creation through sector-based interventions, employment incentives, the expanded public works programs, and the Jobs Fund. The medium term also acknowledges the importance of our social grant programs and welfare services in combating poverty, and the role of public health services and child-focused programs in reducing vulnerability. Honorable Speaker, there are structural shifts underway in our economy that need to be accelerated. Allow me to highlight just a few. In manufacturing, we're helping companies to enhance their competitiveness and upgrade equipment through the Industrial Policy Action Plan. A new framework for special economic zones has been introduced, which allows for targeted incentives, logistics improvement, and active partnerships between business, municipalities, and development agencies. In agriculture, better links between emerging farmers and produce markets need to accompany an improved alignment between land reform and agricultural support programs. We have seen strong increases in maize and livestock production this year. There has also been notable growth in exports of citrus, wine, and horticulture products. In sub-Saharan Africa, South African firms are expanding investment and business partnerships, giving impetus both to regional development and our own export growth. Africa is the fastest growing region in our trade portfolio and offers many opportunities for domestic producers to diversify. In the energy sector, Madam Speaker, we have one of the largest renewable energy programs in the world, with over 60 wind and solar power projects underway. The Independent Power Producer Program will be extended to include 2,500 megawatts of coal projects and 800 megawatts of cogeneration projects to be connected to the national grid. In mining, we recognize the need for a new accord between producers, organized labor, government, and local communities. Modernization of mining is not just about technology. It also involves housing investments, social development, and improved process for dispute resolution. In our financial sector, the Twin Peaks reforms to improve consumer protection and safeguard investments are underway. These will include attention to unfair lending and debt recovery practices. We are working with our network partners to promote retirement reforms, and initiatives to encourage savings are also in progress. The shift away from exchange controls to more appropriate prudential standards will continue, including simpler administrative requirements. In transport and communications, we are in the early stages of major transformative investments. The Passenger Rail Agency of South Africa has concluded 53 billion rands contract to replace over 500 commuter trains over the next 10 years. Transnet is expanding and improving its infrastructure and services. New public transport systems are being constructed in our cities. Telecommunications investments are steadily improving the quality and coverage of broadband networks. These are areas of structural transformation, Honorable Speaker, that involve investment and change across the economy as a whole, bringing together the public and private sectors, civil society, and local initiatives. I need to highlight the key aims of our medium strategic framework, Madam Speaker, that have substantial implications for our budget. The first is that the quality of our education system and our health services needs to be improved. These will remain the top priorities of government spending. 2, building capacity and strengthening accountability of the public sector is critical, particularly at local government level and in state-owned companies. South Africa's spatial landscape has to be reshaped, including investment in dynamic city development, integrated housing and transport programs, and support for business activity and job creation in both urban and rural areas. The medium-term strategic framework will guide the budget decisions that contribute to making the NDP a reality. The required increases in investment and productivity will not be easily achieved. There will be difficult short-term adjustments to achieve sustainable long-term development path. As the NDP says, we must work together as partners to revive investment, avoid lengthy production stoppages, improve public services, strengthen local accountability, and generate confidence in our economy. The recent Operation Pakisa review of our oceans economy is an excellent example of the kind of cooperation that we need. We had intensive engagement over several weeks under expert guidance. This has deepened our understanding and generated practical ideas for further development. On Friday this week, Mr. President, you are again meeting business leaders to discuss measures to increase investment in our economy. On the 4th of November, Deputy President, you are also going to be leading a consultation between social partners on challenges in the labor relations environment. Through forums of this kind, Honorable Speaker, we make progress in implementing the National Development Plan and in addressing specific challenges that confront us. We have responded to 2 such challenges in recent months, Honorable Speaker and members, and let me comment briefly on those. It became clear earlier this year that the African Bank was in difficulty. After consideration of the implications for the wider financial system, it was resolved that African Bank should be placed under curatorship. The intervention was led by the Reserve Bank and the National Treasury and included participation by other banks, private investors, and the Public Investment Corporation. In support of the restructuring, the Treasury has provided a 7 billion rands assurance to the Reserve Bank. Our expectation is that the new African Bank will relist on the stock exchange early next year, and that curatorship will be concluded without the use of taxpayer money. We have also taken steps to safeguard Eskom's financial sustainability. The support proposed for Eskom will allow its build program to continue without an unduly steep increase in electricity prices. Eskom will borrow a total of 250 billion rands over the next 5 years, supported by existing guarantees from government. Government will provide at least 20 billion rands of funding raised through the sale of non-strategic assets. This will be deficit neutral. The capitalization of Eskom will only occur once these funds are realized. If necessary, consideration will also be given to a partial equity conversion of the 60 billion rands loan that has already been provided. Financial assistance to municipalities for free basic services will continue, ensuring that the poorest households are protected against rising electricity tariffs. Electricity supply will remain tight until the first units of the new Medupi power station come online and the capacity of existing plants improves. Even then, it will require several years of substantial public and private investment in power generation before a satisfactory balance between supply capacity and demand is achieved. Stepped up investment in distribution infrastructure is also required by municipalities, alongside investment in demand management and energy efficiency improvements by both business and households. In addition to Eskom, several other state-owned companies are under Cabinet's very close scrutiny. A new framework is envisaged that will distinguish commercial activities from development mandates, accompanied by a more stringent financial reporting requirements. Following the successful restructuring of the Development Bank of Southern Africa, steps to address financial risks and improve governance are being undertaken at SAA, South African Express, the South African Post Office, and the Land Bank. Honorable members, I now turn to the adjustments appropriation for the current financial year. Details are set out for each vote in the adjusted estimates, and I invite members to go through that document. But as in the past years, there are various shifts of funds and minor adjustments. I'll highlight just a few. Additional allocations for unforeseeable and unavoidable expenditure include 157 million rands on the cooperative governance vote to repair infrastructure damaged by natural disasters, and 35 million rands for emergency water and sanitation interventions. 32.6 million for the Department of Health for Ebola control and prevention measures, including support for affected countries. And 350 million rands for international relations and cooperation to compensate for the depreciation of our currency. The adjustments appropriation also includes 620 million for the digital broadcast migration program, as indicated in the February budget speech. After taking into account the unallocated reserves, declared savings and projected underspending, total expenditure in 2014-15 will be about 6 billion rands less than the February estimate. In tabling the 2014 medium-term budget policy statement, Honorable Speaker, allow me to emphasize once more that investment and initiative by both the private and the public sectors are required for our economic growth and fiscal sustainability. The National Development Plan calls for the private sector and the public sector investment to reach 30% of GDP. Progress has been made. Among others, public sector spending on infrastructure has doubled over the past 5 years. But there is still a long way to go if we are to achieve investment-led growth, which is the centerpiece of our development strategy. 2 years ago, we pointed out that if the economic and fiscal outlook were to deteriorate expenditure and revenue plans would be reconsidered. In the 2013 budget, government reduced its spending plans to cut the unallocated contingency reserve. The 2014 budget indicated that additional measures would be required if the economic outlook were to worsen. Members of the House, we have reached that turning point. Fiscal consolidation can no longer be postponed. By proposing measures to reduce the budget deficit, government will stabilize public debt and ensure the sustainability of our critical social programs. The proposals being tabled today complement reforms underway to encourage lower consumption, higher savings, and increased productive investment. Re-establishing a sustainable foundation for the public finances will lower the cost of capital across the entire economy and open the way for investment-led growth. It also means that government will play its part in moderating the wide deficit in the current account and correcting our external imbalance. Together, these fiscal measures will complement job creation and skills development initiatives. These include government's flagship reindustrialization projects of the Presidential Infrastructure Coordinating Commission and support for our expansion of higher education and vocational training. And turning to the fiscal framework, our fiscal framework set out in the MTBPS is as follows. In order to reduce the budget deficit from 4.1% this year to 2.5% over the next 3 years, the expenditure ceiling will be lowered by 10 billion rands in 2015-16. And it will also be lowered by 15 billion rands in 2016-17. To effect the lower ceiling, national government will do the following. One, we will freeze budgets of non-essential goods and services for the at levels of 2014-15, which means, Honorable Speaker, it is not a cut, but we will keep them at the levels that we had them in 2014-16. The second measure is that we will withdraw funding for posts that have been vacant for some time. And we will also and we will go on to reduce the rate of growth of transfers to public entities, particularly those with cash reserves of their own. Across national departments, planned expenditure on travel and subsistence, conference venues and catering has been cut. Advertising and communications budgets have been reduced. Allocations for consultant services have been kept. These steps will contribute to savings of about 1.3 billion rands over the next 2 years. They supplement the cost containment measures adopted at the start of this year, which have already achieved substantial savings. Lower government consumption also requires prudent management of the public sector wage bill, while maintaining the real value of public service salaries. New posts will also have to be funded from existing allocations and natural attrition. Posts that remain vacant will also be reviewed. Honorable Speaker, our consolidation path thus far has relied mainly on containing expenditure growth. Revenue measures will also come into consideration in the period ahead. If we are to avoid reducing expenditure in real terms, about 15 billion rands will have to be per year in additional revenue will need to be raised. Details will be announced in the 2015 budget. The revenue measures will be designed to limit as far as possible any negative impact on growth and job creation. Acting now to re-establish sustainable foundation for public finances will enable government to rebuild fiscal space in the years ahead. Once debt has stabilized, spending growth will be aligned with long-term economic growth trends. In the final year of the MTF period, an unallocated reserve is retained to allow for future shocks to the fiscus or allocations to new priorities. Government will place greater emphasis on longer-term planning and efficient resource allocation. There will be a comprehensive assessment of baseline estimates for 2017-18, emphasizing value for money and alignment with policy priorities. Capital injections for state-owned companies will be allocated without impacting on the budget deficit over the next 2 years, and on condition that a sound business plan is in place. Medium-term expenditure priorities. Honorable Speaker, over the past decade, we have increased public spending in the main budget from 26% to 31% of our GDP. Much of this increase has gone to programs that contribute to social wage, including schools, roads, hospitals, housing, and municipal services. Our medium-term objective is to ensure that public spending promotes growth and creates an environment for greater private sector investment. To this end, we are targeting 3 priority spending areas. The first one is that we will support cities to improve living conditions, modernize transport and communications infrastructure, expand the urban economy, and promote trade and investment. Government will work with development finance institutions to increase investment in the urban landscape and expand the municipal debt market. Secondly, we will reinforce support for export competitiveness and job creation. This includes over 18 billion rands for manufacturing incentives, the establishment of special economic zones, and the employment tax incentive. Thirdly, we will expand the skills base. We've allocated 800 billion, which we propose over the MTEF period for education and skills development. Post-school education and training has also received the fastest growing share of the budget over the past 3 years and will continue to expand. Alongside these priorities, there will be real growth in spending on local development and social infrastructure. As in the past, the largest allocations will go to education, to health, and social protection. This year, Honorable Speaker, 1/3 of allocated expenditure will go to compensation of employees. Over the period ahead, we've budgeted a nominal wage bill growth in line with consumer price inflation. In the present economic circumstances, it is especially important that we maintain a careful balance between personnel spending and other resources required for public service delivery. Honorable Speaker, a national appropriation of 1.2 trillion in 2015-16 is proposed, rising to 1.3 trillion in 2016. The proposed division of revenue allocates 48% to national departments, 43% to provinces, and 9% to local government over the MTEF period. Allocations to national departments will total 495 billion rands in the current year and will increase to 585 billion in 2017-18. Turning to provinces, provinces will receive 469 billion rands next year, increasing to 527 billion. That would be a major cut. Increasing to 527 billion rands in 2017-18. Efficiency improvements will be prioritized in the core areas of service delivery, like basic education, health, roads, and social development. And I keep on repeating this, honorable members. National Treasury will work with provincial departments to improve human resource management and supply chain processes. Special attention must be paid to containing personnel expenditure, which now accounts for close to 61% of the total provincial spending. The Division of Revenue allocates 91 billion rands to local government next year. This will increase to 110 billion rands in 2017-18 to support the medium-term strategic framework outcome of a responsive, accountable, effective, and efficient local government. Support will also be provided to municipalities to improve revenue collections and management of infrastructure financed from both own revenue and grants. The local government equitable share continues to finance the provision of free basic services to poor households, but municipalities must work a little harder to broaden access to these services. What do all these proposals being announced today, Madam Speaker and honorable members, mean for service delivery? Let me be absolutely clear. We will not balance this budget on the backs of the poor. This means that intensive effort has to be focused on achieving the intended savings and maximizing efficiency. This will include a focus on procurement costs. In November, we will release a public procurement review which clearly will outline reforms to be implemented over the next 5 years. The second measure is that cost containment measures will be reinforced to identify goods and services expenditure that can be eliminated without affecting service delivery. A culture of doing more with less is required. For example, Treasury is working with municipalities to link this disbursement of infrastructure grants more tightly to the efficient delivery of capital projects. We will continue to fight waste and corruption, supported by our audit institutions and stringent monitoring and reporting requirements, and that will require the oversight of Parliament. More details of these measures will be provided in the 2015 budget review. Honorable Speaker, South Africans rightly expect efficient, reliable delivery of basic government functions. Water supply, sanitation, refuse removal, teachers in classrooms, medicines and clinics, postal delivery, visible and effective policing. These essential services come first. Where they are in disrepair, they must be fixed. To meet the cost of these services, taxes have to be paid and municipal bills must be collected. So let me again express appreciation. Let me express appreciation to the many South Africans who pay their taxes and bills on time. Our thanks also goes to the officials whose duties are to enforce these laws. In concluding, Honorable Speaker, allow me to acknowledge the guidance and support of President Zuma, the Deputy President Ramaphosa, In conclusion, Honorable Speaker, allow me to acknowledge the guidance and support of our President Zuma and Deputy President Ramaphosa in these difficult times. Cabinet collectively owns this medium-term budget policy statement. Its support and understanding for tough measures is highly appreciated. Thank you, colleagues. My appreciation also goes to colleagues in the Ministers' Committee on the Budget for their continuous and vigorous engagement with the challenges before us. And thank you, Ministers in the Committee of the Minister. A heartfelt thank you A heartfelt thank you. A heartfelt thank you.
Order, Madam Speaker. Can we have security to remove that person there?
I think
There is a problem, that one.
I think they'll do it. Go on, Honorable Minister.
I'm not going to miss this opportunity. I am not going to miss this opportunity of thanking Deputy Minister Jonas for his sound advice. My greatest appreciation also goes to the MECs of Finance, who play a critical role as guardians of 43% of our spending. Our appreciation also goes to the following: the outgoing governor of the South African Reserve Bank, Jill Marcus, who is in the gallery, who has so wisely steered the Reserve Bank during stormy financial times. Governor-designate Lesitsha Kganyago and the other deputy governors. Auditor General, Mr. Kimi Makwetu, and the audit teams who keep us under scrutiny. Commissioner Tom Moyane and the staff of the South African Revenue Services, thank you, Commissioner. The executive heads of the Development Bank of Southern Africa, the Land Bank, the Public Investment Corporation, the Financial and Fiscal Commission, the Financial Services Board, the Financial Intelligence Center, and the Government Pensions Administration Agency. The Managing Director of NEDLEC and its constituency representatives, the chairs of the Standing and Select Committees on Finance and Appropriations, Honorable Yunus Karim, Charles de Beer, Paul Mashatile, and Seiso Mohai, who ensure that Parliament remains a vibrant forum for accountability and public participation. The Director General, Lungisa Fuzile, and the management and staff at the National Treasury and the Ministry. And last but not least, my supportive family who tolerates an absent father. And finally, I must express sincere gratitude to all South Africans who offer words of encouragement as well as criticisms and concerns. This is what keeps us accountable and drives us constantly to improve. I hereby table for consideration by the House the medium-term budget policy statement, the adjusted estimates of national expenditure, the Adjustments Appropriation Bill, the Division of Revenue Amendment Bill, the Rates and Monetary Amounts and Amendment of Revenue Laws Bill, the Taxation Laws Amendment Bill, and the Tax Administration Laws Amendment Bill. Honorable Speaker, our global icon, Dr. Nelson Mandela, set the tone for us in November 1994 when he said, and I quote, "Our primary objective is to address the basic needs of especially the poor. We have to reconcile this with South Africa's resource constraints. We must consequently shift our priorities, accept financial discipline, and create a climate conducive to sustained economic growth," close quote. I table this budget framework at a watershed moment in our country's history. This year, we have been able to celebrate our collective achievements of the past 20 years, creating a more prosperous and inclusive nation, and the maturing of our institutions of democracy and accountability. Surely, we also share determination to protect these gains, to deepen our capacity to meet the needs of our people, and to place our future on a firm foundation. We, Mr. President, together with all South Africans, are joint trustees of this compact. God bless Africa and its people. Thank you.
Honorable Speaker, can I be recognized?
Please take your seat, Honorable Gadi. Please take your seat. Thank you, Honorable Minister of Finance. Honorable members, the medium-term budget policy statement will be referred to the Standing Committee on Finance and the Standing Committee on Appropriations to consider in accordance with their respective mandates. The revised fiscal framework will be referred to the Standing Committee on Finance for consideration and report. The rates and monetary amounts and amendment of revenue laws bill will be referred to the Standing Committee on Finance for consideration and report. The taxation laws amendment bill will be referred to the Standing Committee on Finance for consideration and report. That concludes the business for the day. The House is adjourned.